and welcome to GameSack. We are talking about video games that are based on, you guessed it, movies.
And there's a lot of these out there. Some of them are good, some are bad, and we picked the cream of the crop for you. Right, Joe?
Kind of, maybe. We'll see. Anyway, let's just get right to it. How about Street Fighter the movie, the game for the Sega Saturn? That's right, a game based on a movie that itself is based on a game. Oh yeah, this is gonna turn out really well. So basically we took this and turned it into this. That's a hell of a filter to run a game through. This one is also available on the PlayStation, and it's a different game from the arcade version of the same name. Anyway, it's not quite as bad as you might think. Don't get me wrong, it's not great. The moves are all pretty much there. Everything seems to be based on Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo as it has the finishing combos. Not all of the characters are there though, but at least you get the movie exclusive Sawada. This is the actor that Capcom wanted to play Ryu, but he couldn't speak English very well, so they wedged in the part of Sawada just for him. So the controls and the character selection is okay. How's everything else? Well, just look at the game. Just look at it. Oh man. I can't really think of many positive things to say about it. The floor has some nice line scrolling, I guess. Otherwise, the colors and the detail all suck. And what the hell is with this guy? He looks like he really wants to use that toilet back there. But hey, Jean-Claude Van Damme is here beating up on Raul Julia, so what else do you need? Blanca looks ridiculous. I'm wondering why they even included him in the movie. Actually, I know why, and that reason is Capcom. More orders from on high telling the filmmakers how to make the movie. I mean, come on, not that it stood a chance of being good anyway. The music here is okay, but really nothing stands out. Overall, the game plays well, but it's brought down by its sheer ridiculousness. But maybe that only makes it more awesome? Only you can decide.
Here's Universal Soldier for the Genesis, which was released in 1992. I know that you're looking at this game and saying, wait a minute, you're telling me this is Universal Soldier, but it's clearly Turrican. Well, you know what? You're right. This game started out as Turrican 2. Accolade had acquired the rights to make the game based on the movie Universal Soldier. Since they also had the design for Turrican, they made the decision to turn it into a game based on the movie. Easy money. To make the game follow the movie a bit more closely, they of course changed a few things. Firstly, the main character was changed into a sprite that somewhat resembles Jean-Claude Van Damme. Then, of course, you have to have Dolph Lundgren in there, so the first boss was changed to resemble a 12-foot tall Dolph. It's funny though, I don't remember him being so large in the movie. And finally, some of the game stages were changed to resemble backgrounds from the movie, like this level with the motel. The game seems to be about as unpopular as the movie. I'm not sure why exactly, as I enjoyed playing it way more than I liked watching the movie. It looks great, as do all the Turrican games. Controlling your character is far from perfect, but the best part is that you can actually shoot in any direction. You have to be standing still to do it, but it's handy. It made beating Dolph Lundgren super easy. The levels are absolutely huge. They can be slightly confusing at times, but they're really fun to traverse and try to figure out where the exit is. I like that once you kill enemies, they stay dead, as that really helps you figure out where you've been. If you run across enemies, that means you haven't been there yet. Each level is loaded with power-ups and one-ups if you're willing to explore a little bit. The music is by Chris Hulsbeck, of course, and it's outstanding. It's a very enjoyable soundtrack, and I really liked every song in this game. In the end, I really don't care that they changed the name of this game from Turrican to Universal Soldier. Either way, it's a fun game and way better than the movie. And this is a way better Jean-Claude Van Damme game than Street Fighter the movie.
Dick Tracy on the NES is based on the movie starring Warren Beatty, which itself is based on the comic strip. The movie's pretty cheesy, but how are the games? Well, in this one you need to gather clues, drive to a location, work your way through the thugs, and finally interrogate the subject. Sounds pretty neat, but the gameplay here is kinda rough. For one, controlling your car takes a lot of getting used to. Also, there are snipers on top of the buildings trying to take you out as you drive around. What the hell's up with that? Anyway, pressing select gets you out of the car unless you walk into the building of your choosing. Once inside, it becomes a side-scrolling platformer. You can punch or shoot, but be careful because you lose part of your life if you shoot thugs that aren't shooting at you. This can be a pain because you're constantly pressing select to switch between guns and punching. You also pick up clues in some levels that'll hopefully lead you to your next target. It's an interesting premise, but really, nothing about the game is particularly noteworthy. There's also a Game Boy version if you really need some dick on the go. This one is strictly a side-scrolling platformer. It's similar to the NES version in that you can punch and shoot, but you have to find a random gun lying around first. This game's fairly tough due to the unresponsive controls and the overall sluggishness. There's nothing special about the graphics and sound in this one either. Not to be left out, Sega made Dick Tracy for their systems, including the Master System here. In this version, you control Dick Tracy in the foreground where you can move, jump, and shoot. When you're close to an enemy, you can punch him to death. If you hold down the shoot button, he takes his machine gun and fires it into the background, and you can control where he's aiming. Basically, there's enemies coming at you all over the place, and you've got to decide what you need to shoot first. It can get kinda tough at times. There's even some stages where you don't have a gun and you've got to punch your way to victory. And between stages, you also have a Hogan's Alley type bonus round. The game controls pretty well, but you need to take your time, otherwise the enemies can seem overwhelming, even though there really aren't that many on screen. The graphics and the sound are both amazingly unremarkable. Yeah, it's pretty simple, but I had more fun with it than I did with the NES and the Game Boy versions. But how about the Genesis version of Dick Tracy? Is it any better? Oh, it definitely is. In fact, after playing the other versions, this almost feels like an arcade game in comparison. In this one, they got old Dick to look a lot more like Warren Beatty. You also have a third button dedicated to your machine gun fire, so be sure to pick a setup that's right for you. This game is actually pretty damn fun. Everything controls much more smoothly, and as a result, the game is much more playable. I like how almost everything reacts to Dick's machine gun. I mean, look, he can just pretty much mow off the top of a car with no effort. There's more cutscenes between the stages as well. Oh, that's why I can only punch in the second level. I somehow magically ran out of bullets in a game where I have unlimited ammo. The music is tolerable and it shouldn't annoy you, but it's not special either. Since you have two different buttons for your gun, it can be a bit confusing at times which one you need to press when you're dealing with tons of on-screen enemies. The title screen says that Sega of America programmed it, but it doesn't feel like an early Western game at all. That's probably because it was programmed and designed mainly by Mark Cerny. Yep, the same guy who designed the PlayStation 4. So far, I'm liking Dick Tracy more than the PlayStation 4 though. So if you like Dick, pick this game up.
Let's talk about Ghostbusters. No, not the NES version where you wait around for something fun to happen. There's no fun to be found here. The Sega Master System version of the game is a lot better and was actually made a year earlier, but it's still not very good. There's also Ghostbusters 2 on the NES, which is a little bit better, I guess, but that's not saying a lot. Or how about New Ghostbusters 2, which was only released in Japan and Europe? This one was made by HAL, and I love HAL. It's kind of tricky to play at first, but it's still really fun. Maybe I'll cover this one more in depth in a future episode when I get a little bit better at playing it. So yeah, there's a ton of different Ghostbusters games everywhere, like this one on the Genesis, and there's no way we could ever talk about them all. But the one I really want to focus on is Ghostbusters for the PlayStation 3. It was also for the Xbox 360, PC, and other platforms. This game saw many delays before it was finally released. When it was finally released, it was fairly well received.
When do you have the time to work on all this stuff, Egon?
I've been conducting an experiment in which I sleep an average 14 minutes a day. Leaves me a lot of time to work.
The best part about this game is that it has the voice talents of all the original actors from the film. Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and Ernie Hudson, to name a few.
Are you kidding me? Haunted Laundromat?
The story was written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis. So instead of taking control of one of the original Ghostbusters, you play as a new recruit who's fresh and just learning how to use the proton pack. As you'd expect, the whole game is about ghostbusting. It seems that Ivo Shandor, who designed the apartment from the original movie, also designed a series of tunnels to move ectoplasmic slime through the city. The gameplay is really fun, and using the proton pack is easy and feels great. Just as in the movie, you use the proton pack to contain ghosts and send them into a containment trap for later disposal. This is really fun, and there's a huge variety of ghosts. And what Ghostbusters game would be complete without a battle with Stay Puft? Most of the backgrounds can be destroyed, and this will of course take away from how much money you earn throughout the game. Once you earn enough money, you can buy upgrades for your proton pack that'll help it perform better. So as fun as it is to destroy everything, you should try and be a little careful so you can upgrade your equipment more quickly. Along with your proton pack, you have other tools such as the PKE meter to help you locate ghosts. You can also use it to catalog ghosts and other paranormal substances. There's lots of chatter between the Ghostbusters throughout the game and lots of cutscenes.
She made us look like schmucks. Not this time.
The characters look very much like their real-life characters, but the animation is fairly stiff at times. The music is great because it's all from the movie soundtrack. In my opinion, this is the best and most entertaining Ghostbusters game.
Hey, is there a bathtub overflowing up there?
With the quality of the gameplay, the voice talent, and the movie soundtrack, it's perfect. As Dan Aykroyd said himself, this is essentially the third movie.
Joe, the fat lady's singing.
She is so over. Looks like an opera song. A hefty one at that. Peter, you better take her.
What's that supposed to mean? I'm a chubby chaser? I take out one plump girl on a blind date, like her personality, and you guys can't let it go.
Spider-Man 2 came out on a bunch of systems, but this is the Xbox version because it's supposed to be the best one. I've seen the movie, but I honestly don't remember much about it at all. Anyway, you start out as Spider-Man swinging around the city doing Spider-Man chores like beating up thugs, delivering pizza, and basically being late for everything.
Sorry, I'm running a little late, MJ.
I've gotten used to it.
It's a free roaming game and there doesn't seem to be a time limit to do anything, just as long as you eventually do it. Some events are just there to give you something to do in a video game universe, like beating up countless amounts of thugs. But certain things actually advance the story to make it follow the movie's plot. Web swinging around the town can be tricky and downright awkward at first, but it doesn't take very long before you actually become very proficient at it. And thankfully, you can easily climb walls as well. Sometimes you change into Peter Parker to interact with certain characters. Now just where the hell does he keep all those clothes when he's flipping around as Spider-Man? When you fight, you have a normal attack, and you can also try to tie up your enemies with webbing, but they always seem to break free. Guess maybe I need to use more. That's okay, because I'd rather beat them to a pulp anyway. You can also dodge, but the timing of this isn't exactly the greatest. You're supposed to press it when Spidey's head flashes white, and I swear I'm doing it here, but sometimes he dodges and sometimes he doesn't. The graphics are decent for their time, but all of the buildings really do look the same with very few exceptions. The frame rate is locked at 30 frames per second instead of fluctuating up and down, and I like that. The frame rate should never change during gameplay. It stands out like a sore thumb when it does. It runs in 480p, but unfortunately not in 16:9. As for the sound, well, there's not a lot of it. Tobey Maguire does the voice, and Kirsten Dunst and Alfred Molina are here as well. There's some music from the movie here and there, as well as some original music, but mostly it's just ambient city sounds. I do like the open world in this game, and there's always something to do. In fact, it's probably the best Spider-Man game I've played so far. You know the drill. If this looks good to you, check it out.
Why don't you go chase an ambulance or something? Whatever it is you do.
I would, but it infringes on Lawyer Man's turf, and you wouldn't believe how ticked he gets.
Alright, there you go. You have 5 games so far. Some of them are pretty good.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah, Ghostbusters. I love Ghostbusters. I thought that was a really good game. And there's some bad few in there, like Street Fighter. No, I'm sorry.
It is okay. Yeah, it's not a great game.
No.
But it is better than your stupid Universal Soldier.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And anyway, we've got more coming up, and this next one's yours, so let's just take it away.
Okay. Indiana Jones's Greatest Adventures is a platformer for the Super Nintendo by Factor 5 and, of course, LucasArts. This game tries to include the best parts from all 3 Indiana Jones movies: The Raiders of the Lost Ark, my favorite of the 3, The Temple of Doom, and The Last Crusade. I've got to say that this was an ambitious attempt to try and get all 3 movies into one cartridge. There's 24 levels in the game, and they're all from short to medium length. After the majority of the levels, you get a small cutscene with still images and text that helps piece together the plot from each movie. It's nice to see these, as they are images directly from the movies, so it gives the game a more realistic feel. Overall, it's fairly average for the most part. I really like the Indiana Jones trilogy, so playing the game as Jones was the highlight. The levels are all designed fairly well with nice detail to the characters and backgrounds, but just because it's pretty, it doesn't mean it's a good game. The platforming is fairly easy for the most part, and a lot of the enemies are completely useless. I mean, just look at this guy. He serves absolutely no purpose as he just sits there firing in the complete opposite direction. It's so hard to find good help these days. This happens a lot throughout the game, and it makes it feel unfinished. Other parts, like the scene where you're running away from the large boulder, could have been a little bit better. I mean, look how close to the edge of the screen you've got to be. You're making blind jumps everywhere, and it seems like luck instead of skill when you clear a jump over an obstacle. At least that rock has some killer wicked mode 7. There's also some third-person levels where you're riding in some sort of vehicles like this raft from the Temple of Doom, or flying a biplane from the Last Crusade. Good luck shooting down 20 planes. I swear to God it's impossible. The boss fights are a complete joke though. The patterns they use are simple as they come, and they're just completely unimpressive. The music is pretty good, and it's faithful to the movie, so I guess there's that. They were also making a Genesis version, which unfortunately was never released. For Joe, I don't really care. In the end, this is just an average game. Some things I liked and some things I didn't. But yeah, I think I like the movies more.
Demolition Man onto 3DO was billed as the closest movie-to-game translation ever. They actually shot scenes specifically for the game while they were making the movie. Sly is running around a green screen surrounded by computer-generated graphics just for this game. Too bad the game isn't very good. Well, just like the movie. You start out with a crosshair shooting down enemies and the stuff they throw at you. You can use a light gun if you have one, but if you don't, the control is pretty bad. The crosshair has an acceleration on it, and it's very tough to move precisely with the D-pad. It's also no help that it doesn't take much for you to die. Then there's these awesome one-on-one fight scenes between you and Wesley Snipes. You thought Street Fighter the movie was bad, at least that one controlled well. These guys don't have any special moves and they feel really stiff. There's also these first-person shooter stages where you wander around a giant maze and shoot bad guys. These control really slowly. Thankfully, you don't have to be precise with your aiming to kill the enemies. Wow, not even close to precise. And finally, there's this driving stage where you just drive and avoid cars. There's almost literally no challenge to it at all. The control in the entire game is pretty bad. It's a perfect match for the ugly graphics. The sound is okay, and it features some music from the movie as well as a couple of original tunes from Tommy Tallarico. But overall, this game is pretty much just a snore fest. Yeah, you take that! That'll teach you not to pay your taxes! This game also came out on the Super Nintendo, Genesis, and the Sega CD. These are all quite different from the 3DO version. This is a Super Nintendo version here, and as you can see, it's a run and gun. Unfortunately, it's rather mediocre. There are side-scrolling run and gun stages as well as overhead run and gun stages like this one here where you need to rescue hostages in order to proceed. The Genesis version is the same game but with slightly better voice quality.
Send the maniac to catch one. Send the maniac to catch one.
Unfortunately, the overhead stages cause a ton of slowdown, and it's even worse on the Super Nintendo version. The Sega CD one is basically the same as the Genesis version, but with clips from the movie thrown in and some slightly enhanced music. Basically, no version of Demolition Man is very good, but I'd rather play the Genesis version over any of the others. Yep, even over the Sega CD one, but honestly, I still don't want to play it. Do I really want to continue? Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with no.
Here it comes!
There's probably no bigger movie franchise than Star Wars. As you'd expect, there will be video game adaptations looking to ride the coattails of the movie and earn its share of money also. So yeah, there's all kinds of Star Wars games from the Atari and PC all the way up to the almost current gen systems. Of course, I'd never be able to review even a fraction of all those games, so I've chosen two to talk about. The first one is Star Wars on the NES. In this game, you start as Luke. You're in your little speeder and you're going around Tatooine in an overhead view. There's a number of caves to enter. When you go into a cave, the game takes on a side-scrolling view. There's lots of platforming here and it's all laid out fairly well. Once you reach the end of these levels, you usually find a power-up for your ship or even a gun for you to use. There are some spots like the cantina here where you'll find other characters like Han Solo. Once you gain other characters, you can switch between most of them on the fly. There are a few problems that I noticed that would have made this game a bit better if they were fixed. Firstly, you can only shoot in front of you. It would have been nice to be able to shoot up. It's not a huge deal because the levels are laid out so that you don't really need to shoot up, but it's just something that I miss. Secondly, after jumping, your character slides a bit, which can make platforming a bit harder. And finally, I don't like the fact that you lose life for falling too far. You can even lose life when you're driving your speeder and hit a turret or an animal. I don't like that at all. There's not a huge variety of music, but what I heard I really did like. And although I must admit that I haven't made it through the entire game, I did like what I played. The second game is Super Star Wars on the SNES. I remember having really high hopes for this game and was fairly disappointed when I actually got it and played it. Playing the game after all these years, I'm still disappointed, but not as much as I was back when it was released. You mainly play the game in side-scrolling stages. These stages just don't seem to be very well designed. Like climbing up the sandcrawler here. I'm just bored out of my mind hoping I'll reach the end soon, but it seems like it's never gonna get here. Then inside the sandcrawler, shooting those little bastards. I swear, I can only hear them say, "Ooh, Dee Dee," so many times before I want to turn the damn game off. There's also some Mode 7 driving stages that feel pretty bland. The music is okay. It has lots of reverb, which is typical for SNES games, but it feels like it follows the movie score. The sound effects also annoy me. I really don't like that sound when you pick up hearts and other power-ups, and you hear it constantly. Controlling Luke is okay. He already felt a bit floaty to me, but there are times when you have to make a blind jump and it just doesn't work out. Like Indiana Jones, this game was also in development for the Genesis and it was never completed and released. I don't know about this game. A lot of people really like it, but I guess I'm just not one of them. Stick with the 8-bit game as it's much more fun.
Let's talk about the Back to the Future console games. Almost everyone is familiar with the NES version here, which bears very little resemblance to the movie. You run around collecting clocks while listening to a bastardized version of Huey Lewis's Power of Love. Everyone else on the internet has talked about this game way too much, so let's move on. Back to the Future 2 and 3 came to the NES as a single game. I'm not sure this one is really any better. Here, Marty is fighting giant snails while trying to find a remote for the DeLorean. Maybe this scene is in the Laserdisc Director's Cut? I don't know. The controls are very slippery, but still manageable. I still don't recommend this one though. Back to the Future 3 on the Genesis is probably the worst of the bunch. We've talked about this one before. There's 4 stages, each of them sucking in their own very special way. The controls are awful and the graphics are entirely too dark. There's also a Sega Master System version of this game which only runs on PAL hardware. Speaking of the Master System, there's a version of Back to the Future Part 2 that was only released in Europe. This is even worse than the NES originals. You ride along on your board and if anything touches you, anything, you die. And everything wants to touch you. And I think I'm through touching this game. Then the games took a substantial leap forward with Super Back to the Future for the Super Famicom. This game was curiously only released in Japan. Playing this game is almost indistinguishable from watching the movie. I mean, the same exact things happen. You've just gotten back to 1985 and Doc comes and takes you into the future where you're riding your hoverboard around, doing flips and murdering cops. And don't even try to tell me that those aren't cops and that they're not being murdered. Anyway, you spend the entire game on your hoverboard. You attack by jumping and flipping around, and you also have a speed button to help you get up hills or gain a little momentum. You collect coins throughout any given level, and if you have enough, you can buy a power-up or an extra life at one of these vending machines. A lot of people really do praise this game to no end, and I really don't understand why. I mean, yeah, it's definitely leagues better than any previous Back to the Future game, but it's really nothing special in its own right. The control is sluggish and your hitbox is huge, making it easy to take damage. Add to that, the game can't seem to run at a consistent speed, slowing up and speeding down almost the entire time you're playing. The graphics are cute and colorful, but they do a poor job of conveying the time period you're in. Also, for the entire game, Marty McFly is mugging the camera. Why is he watching me control him? Shouldn't he be looking where he's going? Maybe he'd control better if he was. The stage design is also very poor, like this part here where I'm just going back and forth again and again to get to the top. I can understand why this game stayed in Japan, and I'm kinda glad that it did. I think that my favorite Back to the Future game was Back to the Future, the game, right here on the PlayStation 3. It's also on computers and tablets and stuff, and I think the Wii. This takes place after all of the movies and starts out in 1986. Doc's been missing and the DeLorean returns with only Einstein inside. Now it's up to you to figure out what's going on. Basically, you move Marty around, examine items, collect them, and use them when appropriate. You can also choose how Marty responds to certain situations and conversations.
May I get your name?
Yeah, it's Michael Corleone.
It's all pretty easy, but if it's not easy enough, the game will walk you through because that's how a lot of gaming is these days.
Wait a minute, Doc. You want me to convince your 1931 self to build a rocket-powered drill to break you out of jail?
Precisely.
So, how about the presentation? Well, this game is certainly no tech demo. There's lots of dropped frames and the graphics are pretty much PS2 quality, just rendered at a higher resolution. But what's cool is that Bob Gale helped with the story and Christopher Lloyd and Claudia Wells returned to voice their characters.
Just, what's the date, Jennifer?
It's the 15th.
The year?
1986. Duh.
Michael J. Fox even makes a couple of cameos, and the guy voicing Marty does a knockout job.
I thought I'd never leave.
It was released as 5 different episodes instead of a single game, and that's definitely annoying, but I was still able to download all 5 for a single $1. The story's really fun, especially the alternate future where Doc became evil and took over the town in a sort of dystopian nightmare.
Relax. We've got everything under control.
It'll probably take you 10 or 15 hours to get through the entire thing, and it's well worth your time.
Doc, I'm begging you. You haven't thought this through.
Haven't I? I guess we'll both find out. One thing's for sure, Emmett Brown's life will be a whole lot less complicated without a time machine in it.
No. Ah! What the hell? Where'd it go?
What kind of person would I be if I didn't include GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64? This is easily one of the better games that came from a movie, and pretty much every review shows it. You'd have to look very hard to find a reviewer, either professional or amateur, that didn't like this game. The only people that don't like this game are people that don't like first-person shooters, or as Joe likes to call them, shooty-shoot games. So, as I've stated, this game is for the N64, and a lot of the games from that system really haven't aged too well. And sadly, this is one of them. It's still completely playable, but man, it doesn't look good anymore. I'm alright with that, as I have many great memories playing this game with my friends. This is what it was all about back in the late 90s, getting 3 friends together to play multiplayer all night. Back then, I was young enough to be able to stay up until 2 a.m. and then get up at 6 to go to work. Oh man, do I miss those days. I'd probably die if I tried to do that these days. Anyway, the multiplayer is really the game's best feature. 4 people playing against each other is truly fun. So to capture the footage of multiplayer, it was Joe, Jen, my 6-year-old daughter, and myself. I know the footage isn't impressive to look at, as we're all sucking it up pretty bad, but man, I was enjoying myself after not playing this for a long time. If you get the right group of friends together, you'll be in for a night to remember. That's why we didn't invite Joe back in the day. And of course, there's the single player mode, which is still fun, but it's easily second to multiplayer. This game pretty much proved that a first-person shooter could be successful on a home console. With large levels and a fun storyline to follow, this game was really easy to get into. Even the enemies acted realistically to being shot. Well, that is, if a normal human being could take multiple hits before falling. It took a little bit of time to get back into using the N64 controller, but once I got the feeling back, the game became much easier. Controlling Bond is pretty easy with one analog stick. Using the C buttons to strafe and look up and down is easy to get used to. The music in the game is another thing, as it has a really nice soundtrack. There's lots of different styles of music and variations on the Bond theme in this game, and they all help build a great atmosphere and are very enjoyable. One last thing that I really found funny over the years is the game's cover art. I'm sure everyone knows by now, but wow, why did they give Bond such a huge mouth? One of the best game cover mistakes that I've seen in a long time. If you haven't played this game, then don't wait any longer. It's a true classic and it really should be experienced by everyone.
you go. 10 games based on movies. Now, what games based on movies would you like to see us cover if we talk about this subject again? I mean, don't suggest Total Recall.
Yeah, please no crappers like that. Just games that are actually fairly fun to play. You know?
Like Ghostbusters.
Yes, that was excellent.
But not the NES Ghostbusters. Genesis Ghostbusters.
No. Yes, maybe.
No, you want PS3 Ghostbusters?
I do.
Okay. Anyway, what are some of your favorite movie-based games? Let us know. And in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
What the heck are you doing, Joe?
Threading GameSack the movie. Duh.
GameSack the movie in 35 millimeter?
Yeah, I want it to be good.
Now this is how you make a movie. But I got a question for you. I don't remember being in this GameSack movie.
We're replacing you with CGI. Can we just start the movie already?